All right. So, um, we've been going through Ideology Week. We've said, hey, monarchy's not great, fascism's not great, socialism's not great, liberalism's not great, and neoliberalism brings all of those things together in a nice little package. And that's where we are. And so now I'm going to tell you about my ideology, what I believe in. Because, let's be honest, I've been saying how ideologies all across the board are they're driven by fear. And in the case of liberalism, if they don't have enough fear, well, then they're weak. No one's going to follow it. There's no end goal to liberalism, right? The end goal was to not have a king. Congratulations, you don't have a king. Now you have a president. You're a liberal now. You're a liberal democracy. You're fine. And that doesn't fix anything. Didn't make you have any less people tell you what to do. Because the liberals were caring about being owned, being slaves. As long as you're not a slave, it's fine. But for my ideology, I care very much if I'm owned. I care very much if someone can tell me what to do. For me, my fear is not being independent. Because if I'm reliant on someone else, then they get to tell me if I'm safe or not. Then they get to tell me if I get to eat or not. They get to tell me if I'm free or not. And you see, this is a much more visceral fear than fear of a king, fear of being a slave. It's much more visceral because I will never not need stuff, right? I will always need something, whether it's security or resources or food and stuff like that. Whatever my needs are as they change in the future, I will always have needs. I'll always need something. Food, shelter, clothing, fun. Like anyone will need something along the way. They need stuff. That's what humans are. And so the fear here is that someone else gets to tell me whether or not I get to keep it, whether or not I get to act a certain way or do a certain thing. And so that too will not go away. And this is why I think that for my ideology, it's more visceral than liberalism, but probably not as much as fascism or socialism. So it's not perfect. But if that's my fear, if my fear is that I will be reliant on someone else and someone else will get to tell me what to do, and the whole theme of this week was whatever I fear will happen will absolutely happen, and my ideology even will be responsible for making sure it happens. The same way that the fascist was afraid of losing everything and so they gave everything. The same way that the socialist was afraid of scarcity so they made sure there was scarcity. The same way that the liberalism said, hey, I don't want to be owned, and so instead I'll make sure that everyone gets to tell me what to do. In that same way, my ideology will make sure that I am dependent on someone. And so, if that is what I'm afraid of, if I'm afraid that I'll be dependent on someone, then, well, how's that different from anything else? I don't see that as being a horrible, evil thing. Everyone is always dependent on other people. And so instead of running away from that fear, I'll have to accept that. But here is what my ideology is. It's an old one. It's as old as the words capitalism and socialism, because it was in response to both of those. It's distributism. Distributism as in distributed. Not to distribute as in to give people stuff, but rather that stuff is not all in one place, right? So, in terms of capitalism, well, a few individuals get to be on top and they have everything. With socialism, no one is allowed to have anything. That it just gets redistributed anytime there's any inequality, right? Distributism says that the average person has an average amount. And it's not because, and that's not because the money gets moved around, but rather because everyone's given a chance. And people who fall short are given the skills that they need to no longer fall short. There's definitely a tyrannical way to achieve that kind of parity. But that's not what distributism is about. It's saying that the winners don't win so nearly as much as to have everything. How do you ensure that will happen if you don't tyrannize people and you don't make them do what you say? Because, you know, people are still going to start big, huge companies. They're still going to make massive amounts of money. They're still going to do all of these things. Yes. So how can you make sure that you don't lose anything, and that you don't lose everything like you did with liberalism? That liberalism gave you the liberty to sell yourself. That was it. Well, the way you ensure that doesn't happen is to not buy anything, right? We sell ourselves through our work, through our taxes, all that kind of stuff. We sell ourselves so that way we can get from others. Distributism says, stop being so greedy and earn what you get. Make it yourself. Do it yourself. And if that's not possible, it's not this massive ideological purity test, right? But the trend should be, the more independent you are, the better. And you'll never get there. There is no destination, no universe in which you don't need anything from anyone ever. Because you know what it is, a fundamental human need? Companionship. Right there. You need someone else by definition. You're always going to need other people. You'll never be fully independent. And that's why the fear of being reliant on someone is also not quite right. You shouldn't dictate your entire life on being afraid that someone else will, be important in your life. That you will need them in order to survive, in order to thrive. But in the same way that liberalism let you choose your master, distributism lets you choose the people in your life that you do want to rely on. And here's the wonderful thing. Distributism is not something that requires government at all. There's no enforcement. There's no force at all. It's just who you choose to spend your time with, like you do now. It's how you choose to improve your life, like you do now. And so the difference is not government. The difference is values. And that's why we've been talking about values all this time, all this week. How fear drives each and every one of us. How what we fear determines what we value. And what we value determines our results. Because it determines our actions. And that's what distributism is all about. It's giving you the proper fear. The fear that someone else will get to decide how your life turns out. Whether it's your parents, your friends, your boss, your government. The idea that they get to decide how you live your life, not merely in terms of what you do, but what you're allowed to do, what is expected of you. How high you can reach, how far you can go. Independence is important. Independence is what makes us adults. Whenever someone lives at home with their parents, we act like they're still children, even if they're grown up. And we act like they're children because they're acting like children. Because adults take care of themselves. More than that, they take care of others too. And that is where the fear has to go away. Because if you're so afraid of being reliant on someone else, and where you get driven to is everyone being reliant on you. Because it's the same thing as with socialism. If I don't see a problem, if you're hiding that problem from me, then I can't help you because I don't even know that I should be helping you. That's how Venezuela starved. It wasn't because they had no skills or no abilities. It's because they weren't even told to try. They were told, it's taken care of, sit back down. And this is the true meaning of independence. It's not merely to no longer be dependent on others, but for others to rely on you. Not be dependent on you, but to rely on you. To say, when things get tough, I can ask you for help. And then that'll be good. And that's what distributism is. That everyone has enough to contribute. Everyone has enough to take care of themselves. Not all the time, not every day, not every way. But for the most part. and the places where they fall short, they should ask for help. They shouldn't let their fear be their downfall. They should humble themselves and say, you know what? I know I'm supposed to be completely independent, and I want to be, but I'm not. The issue is, the reason why so many of these ideologies do what they do is because they can't humble themselves before their fear. They can't accept that some people are going to be stronger than them and may make them do things that they don't want to do. Or at least try. They can't accept that the world has scarcity. That there is no way to have so much abundance that you don't need to do anything. That will never happen. That fear of scarcity will never go away, because scarcity will never go away. Accept that. And take your own responsibility to do what you can to improve the abundance in this world. So that way scarcity is less of a problem. Because those strong people that want to take your stuff and want to treat you badly, well then be stronger. Be independent means being stronger. So that way, when someone tries to tell you what to do, you can tell them no and live to tell the tale. Being independent means that you aren't a slave. You don't have a king or a master telling you what to do. But the fear of having a master goes away as soon as your master does. And so with liberalism, as long as they can pretend you're free, then that's enough for them. For independence, it's not enough. To be independent doesn't merely mean someone doesn't take from you by force. It means that your stuff, the stuff that you do, benefits you. You decide where it goes 100%. It comes from you and it benefits you. That is independence. And that's what distributism is all about. It's about having enough so that way you can do stuff for yourself. You can handle your own problems, you can handle your own issues, and you can improve yourself and those around you. Because you're strong enough, you can produce enough, and no one is telling you any different. No one can tell you any different. That's the value of distributism. Now, obviously, I'm not going very deep into this ideology. For this whole series, I've kind of just been surface level on everything. I haven't been diving deep into any of these ideologies. It's just speaking to the core reasons why they exist. And so what I'm going to be doing in future weeks, because after all, if I'm going to do weekly themes, well, there's going to be a lot of weeks in the year. And so for future weeks, I'm going to be going into each one of these ideologies on their own. Since I think that Distributism, the one that I personally believe in, is one of the least known. I don't think anyone watching this will really know what distributism means. Maybe a few, maybe that's my niche, but I don't think it's very common of a belief because it's not a well-known belief. People don't understand that it's the third big sociological answer. First was capitalism under liberalism, then was centralized government, centralized markets under Marxism, and next is this distributed market with distributism. And that's the answer that I picked. Because capitalism, well, we already talked about how liberalism just lets things go. That as long as it's not an obvious tyranny, it's okay. As long as the majority says it's okay, it's okay. It's an amoral ideology. It doesn't care about right and wrong. It cares about, but was it tyrannical? And that's too simplistic of a view of the world. And then socialism, of course, says the opposite, that it will make sure that everyone is equal. It'll force equality, and no one gets to say different. Whereas distributism is kind of in between. It's kind of both. It says that everything should be voluntary, just like with capitalism, and it says that equality should be the goal, just like socialism. But if everything's voluntary and you're trying to get to equality, that's a much different path than socialism. And so we will talk about that some other week. But for now, hopefully you enjoyed this week as we go through these ideologies, how fear influences them and how their motivations push them to make that fear a reality. And that's really why I am a distributist. Because with distributism, my fear is that I will not be independent. But not being independent, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with not being able to do everything yourself. It's not wrong to fall short sometimes. I certainly do. I certainly have. And I'm sure you have too. That's what it means to be human. The point of distributism is to be the best you can be, to do as much as you can, to make this world a better place. And that is something worth fighting for.